emotions. And that's, again, we're going to talk about how and when you, as a writer, might do that. And again, you to start with the basics. Um, Again, to state the obvious, emotions grab your reader's heart. We'll talk about this a bit more in a minute, but a great deal of readers are reading for emotion as much as for plot. So, how and when do you choose to say what your character's feeling? And the first thing to ask is, how do you, the writer, know? How do you know what your characters are feeling? And part of that is things we've talked about in previous classes is writing a bio for your characters. The more you know about your character, the more you understand them, the more you have written a little biography of them and made them a living, breathing person, the more you won't have to stop and think about what they might be feeling. You will know. As a quick example, you're writing a private eye story. And your hero, the private eye, has just left the bar where he was looking for somebody he was supposed to meet. And as he's walking toward the parking lot, his car explodes. Now, is your character the kind who starts shaking like a leaf and says, "Oh my God, that was so close"? Or is your character the one who sits down on a curb and starts laughing and shouts to whoever might be watching, "You idiot, you missed me by 30 seconds"? That will depend, the emotion that that character feels will depend on who that character is. And who that character is who you have decided they are. So, first, know your characters. Write those bios, understand them. They should be, and we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later too, but they should be living, breathing people for you. So the first thing you know is you know what they are feeling. And then we'll talk more about how and when you express what they might be feeling. Okay. Um, I think the most obvious emotional writing out there is romance novels. Heaving bosoms, where hair whipping in the wind, chafed skin, the whole 9 yards. I am not intending to make light of romance, and there's a couple of very good reasons why. But romance writers are good at making their readers feel. If you know anything about romance, if you know the stats, 33% of the mass market paperbacks published are romance. One third. Um, it is the most profitable fiction category by far. The annual revenue of romance novels is $1.4 billion. These people are on to something. And what they're on to is emotion touches the readers and makes them want to come back. The average reader in this country reads 14 books a year. The average romance reader reads one a week, 50 a year. We'll give them 2 weeks off, 50 a year. Those $6.95 paperbacks that you can buy at the grocery store because they make the reader feel. Now, whether you write romance or whether you write any other kind of fiction, there is room in your writing to make your reader feel. And you want to do that. Oh, by the way, um, in my research, this is just an interesting statistic. The number one and number two best-selling romance novels of all time. Number one, 50 Shades of Grey. Number two, Pride and Prejudice, which is, yes, considered a romance novel. That's a very wide spectrum, but those are two. Those two have both sold millions of copies. Okay, looking beyond romance, looking at any other kind of fiction, even nonfiction that you're writing, where and how and when do you want to induce feeling with your characters and through them to your reader? Every character feels. You as a writer are creating a rich, fertile soil of emotions in which to plant your characters. A quick word about that. Every character feels, but some of your minor characters, we might not want to get too much into their feelings, but even them, you can tell us that their cheeks are burning as they walk out of the room because they've just been reprimanded. Even your minor characters, you can drop in a little bit of emotion here and there. Um, so, moving back to where we started, when do you show your characters emotion, and when do you allow the reader to create their own emotional reactions to what your characters are going through? Um, there are a lot of different ways to approach this. The first and most obvious is instinct. You're not even thinking about it. You're just writing. He was horrified. She was thrilled. He was puzzled. You're salting emotion in to your writing without even thinking about it. But that second layer, as we talked about earlier, is when you go back through to consciously look at where is the emotion, and the way to put this is, um, as you're doing, because I believe, as most of you probably do, that writing is rewriting. um, that we all go through draft after draft after draft. um, but that second layer is craft. You're consciously saying, I want to basically, I want to show off the emotions here, or my critique group has told me I need to show off the emotions here. And you're doing it that way. It's starting at the beginning. It's rarely a good idea to temper your character's emotions, and by that I mean you want your character to feel. So why would you limit that? When you write, she was somewhat peeved. He was mildly amused. Sometimes it's exactly what you want, but you want to be careful of tempering your emotions too often. Let your characters feel. We are not Jane Austen. Back to her. Again, he was not unhappy to see her is a great line. I like that line. But how not unhappy was he? That's a little tempered. That's a little, under the table. And so don't be afraid to give vent to your character's emotions. Um, so um, there's a couple of different ways you can show emotion. Um, One of them is the omniscient narrator. Your narrator who knows all, who sees all, who understands all, can simply tell us what your character is feeling. Let's take a look at an example of how an omniscient character, how an omniscient narrator might write an emotional reaction. This is example one here. I hope you can all see this. Does that need to be bigger?
Looks
Make
good to
that a
me.
little bit bigger. Okay. He stared past her, looking through the restaurant's large windows into the tranquil marina. He refused to allow her to see how much her comment stung. This is our narrator simply telling us he's hurt, not using that word, and again, telling us two things. A, whatever she said hurt, and B, he really doesn't want her to know that. So this is, again, we are, there's a thing, show don't tell, but sometimes we just are telling. Then here your narrator is telling us. There's a whole thing, by the way. This is maybe not the best moment to get into this, but there's a whole thing which maybe some of you have already heard of: close voice, distant voice. When are we right up close? When are we in your character's head? When are we thinking and feeling what they are thinking and feeling? And when are we, this is back the forest for the trees kind of thing, when are we back and a narrator is showing us that more distant example? That first example was, most people would say, was an example of distant voice. Let's look at an example of close voice. Let's look at getting right up close and personal inside that character's head when he or she is telling us, showing us what they're feeling. And that might be the same situation, but a different take on it. He stared past her, looking through the restaurant's large windows into the tranquil marina, hiding his hurt. I'll be damned if I'll let her see any reaction to what she just said. This is two things. Here, we know he's hurting because he's hiding it. And here um, we have inner monologue. We are in the character's head. We are with him. He's not telling us I'm hurt Or he's telling us, I refuse to let her see my hurt, which tells us he's hurt. Again, the show don't tell thing, he was hurt, he was surprised, he was shocked. Sometimes those are just fine, but often you want to show us how we know that. Okay. Um, Moving right along. By the way, if when you are working within a monologue, here are the guidelines. We won't call them rules, we'll call them guidelines. Most often, inner monologue is in italics. When it's in italics, you don't need he thought, because we know the italics are what he is or she is thinking. And it's first person present tense. And we'll look at a couple more examples of that a little bit later and point that out. And in general, you want to avoid, again, this is true always, but it's especially true with emotion. You want to avoid passive verbs, was and is. He was angry, for example. Show us how he's angry. Don't tell us he was angry. Okay. Another way to dampen the emotions your characters are expressing is filtering. If you haven't heard that term before, if you're unfamiliar with it, filtering is literally called filtering because it's putting a filter between the writer and the reader. And common filters might be, he realized, even he saw the ball bouncing toward him. Why not just write the yellow ball bounced toward him? If we're in his point of view, we know that's what he saw. So you can skip that part. And again, I can pull up another example, a couple of examples of filtering, so you get the idea. Here we go. So here's version 1. She walked into the restaurant and stood at the reservation desk waiting to be seated. He realized that he recognized her. She'd been at the board meeting. She was the one who'd spoken up. He realized is filtering. That's the filter between the writer and the reader. And you don't need it because we're in his point of view. You don't need to tell us he realized it. You can tell us simply, she walked into the restaurant and stood at the reservation desk waiting to be seated. He recognized her. She was at the board meeting. She's the one who spoke up. And here we are using both, he recognized her without the filtering, and inner monologue. This doesn't have to be, by the way, this doesn't have to be inner monologue because one of the rules is don't overuse inner monologue. This could simply be, oops. First of all, you would take that. He recognized her. She was the one at the board meeting. She, because we're going back to past tense instead of present tense, she'd been the one who spoke up. Either version works. Again, this is where we don't have the filtering, and if it's present tense, if it's inner monologue, it's past tense if it's not. Okay. Oh wait, I think there's another example. I think I popped out too soon. Moving on to get the same idea. It occurred to him that he could walk up to her and offer her a seat at his table, but he was afraid she might think he was hitting on her. 2 examples of filtering. It occurred to him, you don't need it, but he was afraid. How can you write this without the filtering? Here's an example. He watched her as she waited. Should he walk up to her, offer her a seat at his table? Would she think he was hitting on her? Now we're back inside his head. And again, this could be inner monologue if he chose it. Should I walk up to her, offer a seat at the table? Would she think I was hitting on her? Will she think I am hitting on her? Either one. You get the idea. But filtering is one of the ways we temper emotion. We 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 limit, we dilute the emotion. So you want to look out for filtering. Keep your keep your be as close to your characters as you can, except when you're choosing consciously to be in that forest of the trees and in that back looking at the whole forest thing. Um, but when you choose to be close, skip the filtering, get to the heart of the matter, and show your characters' emotions. Um, there are a lot of quibbles about how and when inner monologue should be used. By the way, my rule is don't use it often, but when you use it in that direct, emotional, impactful way. Pick the places that are the most impactful and use those in your emotion. And again, that inner monologue tends to bring the reader closer to your characters, which is when you're talking about emotion, which is what you want. Um, every writer is different. Every writer has his or her own style, their own way of working. Um, so, like we talked about it a minute ago, I tend to assume the emotions are going to be obvious, and I tend to go back and rework in that second or third or fourth draft. And the question I ask myself in when I go back and start to rework on a scene isn't what does my character think about what just happened. The question I ask myself is what does this character feel about what just happened or about what was just said. Ask yourself that question. What is my character feeling right now? And see what the answer is and see how that might influence how you rework the scene. We'll look at a couple of examples of reworked scenes in a minute here. Um, I think we used the example last class or the class before of that young army recruit. He's 18 years old. He's all in his crisp new uniform. He's watching his girlfriend leave on that train. Um, um, if that young recruit is thinking he may never see her again, that's what he's thinking. That's not what he's feeling. That's a great example of me, if I were writing that story, to say, what is he feeling right now? Not what is he thinking. I might never see her again as a thought. I might never see her again. And it felt as if he were drying up and crumbling away to dust and leaving nothing but a pile of clothes on the platform. That's an indication, without telling us he was feeling sad or he was feeling lonely. That's a way to show us the emotions he might be feeling at that moment. All right. Um, let's take a look at a couple of examples. This is from one of my own novels, um, of going through, sometimes listening to what my critique group has said, and sometimes just me going through and saying, what are the characters feeling right now, and imbuing with a second draft more emotion into what my characters are thinking, what my characters are feeling more than what my characters are thinking. Let me set this up. Okay, so a quick background on this story. This is my story about the world's richest billionaire who has his own fleet of space shuttles, who has built himself a factory on the moon and is now building what will be this huge orbiting platform, a place where people can go and live. If all goes to hell in a handbasket on Earth, you could just go up there and live the rest of your lives. The place will be huge. He's gone to Congress and he said, I need a workforce to make this place out. I'll need thousands of people. Give me all the prisoners in federal prisons, and I I will I will charge you less than the prisons are charging right now, and I will keep them where they can never ever bother anybody again. Okay, that's the plot. Now, most of our main characters, as you might guess, are the prisoners working to begin that plot, building that huge. It'll be basically a Campbell's soup can in space. It'll be 7 miles long, 4 miles wide, and because it spins, it makes artificial gravity. Anyway, so at the beginning, there is no atmosphere, there is no gravity. They're just building a space to live in. and we meet these characters, and we'll just look at a couple of rewrites. Here's the first. Rye and Elle, two of our heroes, look out the window of their shuttle at the progress their team has been making on the orbital. Rye nodded. Tomorrow, we lay panels at right angle to that section. Tomorrow, we start to make our new home. Now, when I first wrote that, I thought his emotions were obvious with this statement. We start to make our new home. I'm not telling you, I'm just assuming you know what he's feeling. In a rewrite, by the way, almost all the rewrites are a bit longer, but in a rewrite, this is what I came up with. Rye nodded. Tomorrow, we lay panels toward the center. He stared at the enormous arc visible through the shuttle portholes. 2 miles from here. That's where the main dock will be built. He gestured at the site before him. We build to there. We should be able to get there in less than 2 days. We come back here to the edge. We start to make our new home. Our new Eden, Elle said. Rye saw in his mind a little patch of garden that would be his own, the oasis he'd create in a community of others doing the same. He grinned. I'm not telling you, by the way, what his emotion is. He was happy, he was sad. That would be passive voice, and that would be telling, not showing. I am showing you in this patch of dreaming about his own garden, this guy who's been in prison for the last several years. Hopefully I'm showing you. Okay, moving on to the next quick example. They decide they want to add women to the mix. Big deal, but they decide they will. Sarah is in the astronaut training. Our female lead, undergoing astronaut training to see if she's a candidate. First draft. Sarah climbed out of the pool, her spacesuit feeling heavier as she did. A young, svelte woman helped her out of the suit. Okay, not nearly enough emotion in that. The rewrite is a bit longer, but Sarah climbed out of the pool where the neutral buoyancy of the water allowed her to practice using tools and simulated weightlessness. Her spacesuit felt heavier as she made her way out. The heaviness of the suit contrasted with the lightness bubbling up in her. This was the last day of the 2-week training, and she knew without a doubt this was what she wanted to do. A chance to start over, not only because she'd be out of prison, but because she could put her skill set, her vocation, to use once again. Something she'd never have thought possible. A young, svelte woman helped her out of the suit, and a pang shot through Sarah. This woman didn't look that much older than her daughter. Will I ever see her again? Will she ever talk to me? Okay, so 2 emotions here. Lightness bubbling up on the good side, a pang shot through her on the not so good side. Again, expanding what's here and showing the emotion. Take a look at one more. Rye and Elle wait for the first shuttle of women to join them in the orbital. Rye, Elle, and oh, by the way, it's still no. Everybody's in a spacesuit, no atmosphere, no gravity. Rye, Elle, and a dozen others waited in a common area in their spacesuits. The elevator doors opened. A dozen women floated into the room. Sarah in the lead. She stepped onto the velcroed floor, caught on, and made an awkward walk toward the men. Rye held out his hand. She shook it. I'm Sarah. Rye. Even through her helmet visor, she looked beautiful. Okay, this is the beginning of an attraction between the two, but there isn't much emotion here. Back to asking myself this question. Rye is waiting for these women. What does he feel? And asking that question, the rewrite is, Rye, Elle, and a dozen others waited in the common area in their spacesuits. Sweat pooled in the armpits of Rye's inner suit. Does my anxiety show on my face? For years, the only women he'd been around were lawyers, court employees, and the few family members who'd come to the prison. There'd been no lunches, no dates, no conjugal visits. Now he was about to greet the women he'd be working with for the rest of his life. The elevator doors opened. A dozen women floated into the room. The one in the lead stepped onto the velcroed floor, caught on, and made an awkward walk toward the men. As she approached, Rye stared. Her big, dark eyes, her radiant smile. Even through the clear visor of her helmet, she was beautiful. She held out her hand. I'm Sarah. He shook it. Rye. Now, you might argue that you could go even further with his emotions, but again, I'm not saying you necessarily need to spell them out. You need to set up the scene better so that we, the reader, better understand the emotions these characters are feeling. Okay. Um, I I'm a member of SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and I think I've mentioned one of the presenters, um, a kind little old lady who's a million times a bestseller, literally, who said some things to us that made us all laugh. The one I mentioned last time was she said, "Whenever I'm not sure what my character should do next, I take a nap," and we all laughed. And then she said, "And when I wake up, I know what to do." And the thing she said about emotions was, whenever I'm not sure what my characters are feeling, I ask them. And I thought, I think we all kind of laughed up our sleeves at her. But not that long after that, I was sitting in a bit of a quandary, not knowing what my characters might be feeling or what they wanted. And so I tried it. I asked, "Okay, so what do you want here, character?" I thought he was not going to shut up. He just went on and on and on, these emotions flooding out of him. It was like, damn, that's all been in there and I've been paying no attention to it. Okay, maybe this isn't the worst way to get out of a box that I write myself into. Ask the characters. If you know them well, they might just have an answer for you. Um, and again, so when you're starting your rewrite or looking at your chapter again or just going over it, the question to ask is not what is my character thinking right here? What is my character feeling? You could take a day, maybe we all have them, the days when you don't really feel like writing, but this is your writing time, you're sitting down to write. You just go through it scene by scene. What is my character feeling here? Again, it's not that you have to rewrite every single scene, but those places where you can salt in a little more emotion, where you can get your reader to feel. That's a reader who's going to come back to your next work. So, um, there are other kinds of emotional writing, by the way. Um, uh, and I'm gonna share Elmore Leonard's 10 rules of writing with you in just a minute. He has a couple things to say about this. But there is a poetry in describing a sunset or describing a mountain or describing a lake, um, that in itself can elicit emotion. Just not you don't even have to tell us, your character does not even have to be thrilled with the beauty of this place. You just describe the beauty of this place and your reader will be thrilled by it as well. There are a couple of cautions. um, I will mention, I think most of you, if you've worked with me before, I wrote for television before I started writing novels, and I had a pilot at CBS, um, and it was working its way up through the ranks. And it was set in Seattle, a city I love, a city I lived in for a while. And every time I fly back, there's Mount Rainier on the right, and you're coming in, and there's the Olympics on a clear day. The Olympics are on the left, and you're coming through all of those square miles of forest. And the note from a CBS exec in red, in handwriting, on that page was, uh, too much beautiful writing. And that I took to heart in that script and in my novels as well. Go ahead and describe that beautiful scenery. Just don't describe the beautiful scenery too often. Here are Elmore Leonard's 10 rules of writing. Um, I'll share with you, and I'll tell you where Mr. Leonard and I ex- disagree with each other just a tiny bit. Um, so, Elmore Leonard's 10 rules of writing. Never open a book with weather. Avoid prologues. Never use a verb other than said to carry dialogue. Never use an adverb to modify the verb said, he admonished gravely. That's his own sense of humor there. Keep your exclamation points under control. You are allowed no more than 2 or 3 per 100,000 words of prose. Never use the word suddenly or all hell broke loose. Use regional dialect patois sparingly. Avoid detailed descriptions of characters. Don't go into great detail describing places and things. Try to leave out the part that readers tend to skip. My most important rule is the one that sums up the 10. If it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. Now, Mr. Leonard and I agree on a great many things. I would modify Rule 9. I would say not don't go into great detail describing places and things. I would say do that sparingly. Do that occasionally. We've all read those beautiful passages of description. Um, and again, they can be moving, they can be beautiful. Just don't don't use them too often. Okay. Um, okay. Um, oh, I see what I just did. I just screwed that up. Anyway, um, so feel free to stop and smell the roses. You can bring emotion to the reading uh, in that way, but not too often, not too much beautiful scenery. And again, ask yourself that question: what is my character feeling? Based on what has just been said, based on what has just happened, based on what he or she has just seen, what is my character feeling? Okay. I do think we have time for the bonus round. The bonus round is critique groups. I mentioned mine before. I have been involved. I I had the good fortune to meet Susan Vreeland when her first book, Girl on Hyacinth Blue, had just come out. We met at the Festival of Books when it was back at UCLA, and she and I stayed in touch for years. And she insisted that I had to find a critique group. Even after her novels became, four of them became New York Times bestsellers, she always ran a draft through her critique group before she sent it to her editor. Um, and she tried to help me find one, and I found, as Gary knows, I found the Ventura County Writers Club, the now the extinct group that I joined specifically to work with critique groups. Um, I started my first group after having, you know, kind of checked out, I think, almost literally every single critique group they had. I started one in 2005, and I joined another one in 2010. And both of those groups are still active. They're still working. Um, and here's a quick, if you don't know, a couple of things why you should join, because there are things in your own writing you don't see. And other people will point out to you. There are things in my writing that I point out to my fellows in critique group, and they turn around and point out the same thing to me. I see it in their writing. I don't see it in my own. You want someone to be there for you. Here's the reason not to join. Don't join because you want someone to tell you how good your writing is. That's what your mother's for. Um, uh, one of one of one of the fellows who joined the group, not he didn't join in 2010. He joined several years later, but he came to that group saying two things. He was a little frustrated because in the critique group he was in at the moment, they all told him how good his writing was, and he'd heard that we were a little more exacting than that. And he admitted later that there were days after joining our group when he wanted to go home and cry because he got exactly what he wanted, which is us being very, that group is, damn, don't put a comma out of place for that group. But anyway, um, uh, here's in any group. First of all, you are already a group of writers. You have Zoom. You could be, some of you right this minute are all over the country, and you could be in a critique group in exactly the same way. And here's the question to ask yourself if you're going to join a critique group. Are the notes I'm getting from this group making my writing better? If that's true, even if they make you want to go home and cry afterwards, you might want to stick with them. And if that's not true, you might want to find another group. Anyway, um, that's a special bonus round on critique groups. Now, we can open this up to any questions you might have, either about writing emotionally or about critique groups. And I think you're all muted, so any of you who feel like speaking up, just go ahead and
I
unmute
was,
yourself.
since everybody's so quiet, I was going to call on Jim Tritton to talk about critique groups
Okay.
because I do think that he has something to say.
Well, Val, I always have something to say, but the question is about what? Okay, critique groups. I have also, Greg, been in numerous groups, and I went into some with different expectations and different purposes. For example, when a group that I was in started to either tell me what they wanted me to write and not critique me, but try to direct me, I moved to a different critique group, and because I'd been with that first group for many, many years. And I specifically went into a group that had younger people, because all of the people who live where I live were all old. and I needed a different input. I needed an input from younger people, and this group had nothing but women. Well, that's not, there were probably a couple of guys in there, but it was mostly the vocal ones were women. And I thought this would really be good. Here's a mystery set in New Mexico, and it was I'm going to kill 7 Navy SEALs. And the critiques were, well, where are the women? And I went, well, they don't have women in the SEALs. Well, why not? You know, this is a critique group. You're supposed to be critiquing, and they couldn't get past their vision of reality and mine. I've reached the point now where I'm trying to use critique groups as ways to help other veterans write, and I'm deliberately looking for veterans. I'll help some to get started, but at where I am now, I really would prefer to have people who have published books already and are into serious critiques. They know what it's all about. I don't need to teach them about a critique group. Valerie, was that what you thought you wanted me to say?
Yeah, and also that I was thinking about the Red Penguin books groups and trying to get
Okay.
critique groups going there, and sometimes it's a little more challenging than others. And Greg, I completely agree with you about finding the right place, and the same thing with writers groups. But yes, that if you find you're going to a critique group and all anybody's doing is saying that's beautiful, you should publish it, then maybe that's not the most helpful critique group.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about the Red Penguin group. Red Penguin is a small publisher. Well, let me say it the right way the first time. I have a New York publisher. They're called the Red Penguin. Now they happen to be a very small publisher, but they are in New York. And the publisher asked me if would I run a critique group for them, and I tried to, and we had a hard time getting people to sign up. It was a little bit disappointing. And we had people who didn't really understand. They were in the beginning part. They didn't understand what the critique group could do to help them, and they got into it. It was confrontational, and then it finally became, okay, well, I'll listen to what you're going to say, but I had no expectation that they were going to change a single word. And that gets frustrating if you're in a group where you're giving it your all. I was in another complete group, a completely other group, and it was somebody was writing about a genre, and I did a lot of it's not my genre, but I did a lot of research into the genre, and I came back and I said, well, when people do time travel, this is the general way it works. It works this way, or it works this way, or it works this way. But the way you're doing it is not like anybody else does it. And okay, that's fine. But here are the questions that I have. And again, it was like, well, I'm not going to change anything. And then I discovered she had never written anything before in her life. And she didn't take critique. She took it as criticism. And I was really trying to help. So thank you, Valerie, for calling on me.
Hey, Jim, this is Gary. I can completely commiserate. I've been in two critique groups, and they both, for me personally, were not the most productive. Um, and so finding the right group is exceedingly difficult, at least in my experience. And I'll give you an example. When a woman was writing a story about a young girl with a horse, the horse died in the introduction, and then her mother died in chapter 1. And at that point, I asked myself, why am I reading this? And I said, maybe we ought to drag some of this out a little bit. I don't know. It just was very hard for me to relate, and I found myself not having much to say that was constructive. So anyway, finding a critique group that's at your place in your writing journey has
Yeah.
not been easy.
No, it's exactly right. It's at your place. And I mean, I was a beginner too. We all were beginners at one point. And when you're in a beginning critique group, you need to get a lot more reinforcement. Right now, I want that critique group that Greg was talking about, where it's going to be hard to take. But that's what you need. And I also, the group that I was in for the longest period, which was like 5 or 6 years, they got to know me too well. And I needed fresh eyes looking at my work instead of the same people. Well, we told you 2 years ago, don't kill the dog, And I got, well, but I did it for a reason. I wanted this guy to go totally berserk, and therefore I had to give him something that was just, and they knew me, they knew the old writing, and so yeah, good point, Gary. I agree.
Well, try and drag somebody else into this abyss. We got some great help in trying to rethink through our magazine. And I phoned a friend. I called in a lifeline, and I called Don Brotherton, and I said, "Help! I'm not an editor. I'm a budding author, I think, and we want to have a magazine for members by members." Anyway, so we started to get a group of really good editors, and we said, "Well, I'm a writer, right?" So I said, "Well, I don't know anything about editing. I know what I like when I write." Anyway, so I called Don, and Don walked us through basically the steps of editing for a novice. And where we got to was a process, and Valerie was there on our conference call when we tried to lay out a process where we would have a series of editors look at articles that come in and give writers some feedback, so that we can publish a magazine that's got respectable material. And we're in the formative stages of it. It may not work out. It may turn out to be just too much work. But the whole basis of what Don, I believe, and you can chime in, Don, what she was trying to tell me was that the basis of this is go step by step, and the basis is a critique group. And so, like I said, maybe it'll work out. We hope it will. We've got a great team of editors. We're trying to recruit more. So Sue Rushford, don't hang up. But anyway, Don, do you got anything to add other than my thanks?
Don, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Might be something other than your mute that's keeping your
Heard you saying that I
microphone.
was brilliant.
Well, of course.
That's
That
just
goes
me.
without saying.
She's online because she just texted me chat, and yeah,
Okay.
she just texted 2 seconds ago. That's what
Yep.
it was.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny because delving a bit more into critique groups, there was a very kind gentleman, very good writer in my critique group who would rewrite sections for me, which really irritated me. And
Yeah.
another member of the group took me aside and said, what he's saying is there's something wrong with this section. There's something wrong with this sentence. Don't look at his rewrite. Look at where he's rewriting. And that was very helpful. I thought, okay, so Mal didn't like something bugged Mal about this sentence, about this paragraph. So I'll look at that. I won't look at his version, but I'll look at, I will rewrite that on my own. And I do have there again. You kind of, no group is perfect. No group is going to make you happy all of the time. I have a woman in the group who tends to make assumptions. Just one example, because we just met yesterday. In the chapter I turned in yesterday, our main characters are leaving the courtroom. The case has just gone in our main character's favor, and he is relieved and about ready to fall over. And they are getting him out of the courtroom before the press start hounding him. And she, for some reason, assumed that the room they were going into was the press room. So she changed the wording to add the press room. And then her note was, if he wants to get away, why is he going in the press room? But he was going into the hallway that led outside. And she just thought, I don't want to get too specific here, but the thing to do with those notes is to thank her and ignore them. In any critique group, you're going to get notes you like. I used to do a whole thing, which was basically in a critique group, you're going to get three kinds of notes. The first kind is, as they're giving the note, you're thinking to yourself, why didn't I think of that? That is brilliant. I want to shut Zoom off and write that right now. And the answer to that kind of note is thank you. Then you get the kind of note where, that makes sense, but I would have to go back to chapter 1 and set that up, because as much as I like that, if I don't set that up, that won't make any sense to anybody. And the answer to that note is thank you. And then there's a kind of note, as was the why are they in the press room note, where I'm nodding and smiling and think you have no idea what this scene about. And the answer to that note is thank you. And the reason is two. One, thank you suggests you can stop talking now. I get it. I get your note. Because especially on Zoom, if you're just sitting there, they might just keep talking because they're afraid you don't understand the note. And thank you says, I understand the note. And then, because here's the thing, you're going to go home, or you're going to be home, you're going to turn Zoom off, and you're going to look at the notes, and you're going to take the ones that work. And you're going to ignore the ones like, why did they go in the press room? Because that's not where they are, and that simply doesn't work, and you don't have to make a big deal about it. And I did not say it's not a press room. They're not in the press room. They're going to the hall outside, because that takes too much time. I don't need to argue the note. I simply need to nod and smile and say thank you and not take the note. The arguments, again, first of all, they can get a little testy, and secondly, they just take up time. That's different, by the way, than needing explanation. Why, again, the other thing I say, because I set up critique groups with my students. So what I say to them is, don't ask the question, do you not understand why he's only murdering women with pink hats? Because if they understood why your character's only murdering women with pink hats, they would not have asked the question. Don't defend your work. Do you not understand this? Isn't it okay the way it is? But you can ask for clarification. What don't you understand about this? Why is this not clear? How could this be more clear? That's a conversation in a critique group you can have. But try not to defend your work. Try to say thank you as often as you can. Take the notes that work and leave the notes that don't.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Why, yes.
Okay, because I had my laptop closed. That's why. Just checking.
I need to duck out for another Zoom, but Greg, thank you. and shades of red team reviews and stuff, but very valuable. Appreciate it. Let's do some more. Thank you.
Bless you.
See you
Thanks.
next time.
Gotta go.
Thank you. Don, did you want to add something?
No.
No, I was just testing to see if my thing would work.
Okay.
I'm trying
Okay.
to figure out why it wasn't working. It's because I was using my big monitors and my laptop, I'd left it closed because I wasn't planning on getting on screen. I do appreciate what you said, though, Gary. Thank you very much. I'm very excited. I've already emailed Jim going, dang it, I've been looking for a critique group where I'm not the teacher. I don't want to be the teacher. I want somebody to rip my stuff apart and make it better. So I'm very excited about getting into a critique group. So.
Well, you could get a comment from Valerie that says something like, "It's not horrible." No, it's in all seriousness. Two things. First off, if there's any comments on or questions for Greg on emotion, let's make sure we've answered all of those. And I will make a point of sending to John Elmer Leonard's rules of writing, and maybe he can forward that on to social media and get those out. I think that's an easy thing to do, and we can get things posted on social media that cover lessons of writing from famous authors. So, but does anybody have a question specifically for Greg about emotion?
Gary, I do. And do you have any recommendations for like resources, tips? So for some reason, the emotion thesaurus comes to mind for me. And that's something that I've used that, you know, it just helps me spark a thought, you know, helps me getting on another train of thought. And I was just wondering if you had any other, you know, just tips or tricks on other than asking how the character feels.
I'm not familiar with the emotion thesaurus. What is the emotion thesaurus?
It's Becca Puglisi, I think. If somebody out there has the name, they can help me. I don't have it handy here, but it's sort of like, okay, so it says if you want to show anger, here's way to show anger, and there's a bunch of, you know, show versus tell things like you said, you know, the pulse raising, the, you know, face getting red, those kind of things that and it has that for all different kinds of emotions, happy, sad, you know, grief, etc. And they're more more physical, but
Right.
it's like I said, you know, it's not like a thesaurus where you go and you pick out a word and go, okay, I meant happy and I'm going to say glad instead. It's not like that, but you know, but
Right.
to me, I
It's
found it
more-
useful to try to help me think of other ways to show an emotion.
It's more fist clenching and yeah, and pulse racing kind of stuff. Yeah, okay.
Right. It's over here. I'll grab it and I'll put it in the chat in a minute. So.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else on emotion? Well, I don't see, oh, maybe I do. I don't see anybody with a hand up or anything else. Okay, we got a few minutes. I thought I would ask the question I was told specifically not to ask the group. And that was we're at a end of the season, so to speak, for this year. So we're in the planning stages for next year. And what I was told not to ask the group is, what do you want to hear about next year? So on that note, has anybody got any ideas on what we should cover next year? And I will tell you, we can take one of two paths or a combination of the two. One is the craft of writing, and the other is the business of writing. I know Don did a series of webinars on editing, but there's a whole, and we get a lot of questions about the business of publishing, marketing, all those types of things. I know most of us would rather eat a bug than take on the marketing issue. But anyway, we can go a bunch of different directions. Does anybody have any thoughts as we plan out next year?
I would like to learn more about screenwriting, actually, Greg. hint, hint, about the actual, that piece of writing. That's a totally different writing style. I would like to learn a different writing style like that. I think that would be helpful. Obviously, Gary, if you end up doing the business of publishing, I can help with that part.
Okay, thank you.
One thing we have talked about, Gary, that's fairly easy to do. We've got a group that is somewhat representative, but not completely so, is we can poll the membership. Just put a quick questionnaire online and ask the membership. And if you get 12 people that say, I want to learn how to use, Amazon, or I whatever their answer is, that at least gives you some guidance on what your audience wants, because this group is just the small cross section of the people who need to be asked that question. There's also several questions online that Marie, I think, asked a couple of them. Can you see those, Gary? That maybe we can.
Maybe I missed them, John. So go ahead. What are they? So
well, one says Marie said a great idea to put the rules on social media. Where are we going to put them? That's kind of interesting. One of the best places is, I think, that is underutilized is our tips and tricks area. But there's any number of places where we can take stuff like that. I know that Greg's, once we do the editing and putting together the video, this presentation will be available along with the, the rules that he put on the screen. Because I actually took a screenshot of that because I wanted to make sure that I got it. So maybe I get something that looks nicer than the screenshot, but that certainly will go in our writer's education section. But yeah, I mean, that was one thing. Where it's going to go is a good question. I don't know.
well, I mean, finding those pearls of wisdom is not hard. I actually collected a bunch of them by famous authors. I can start to share those with you, and at the appropriate time we can put them in tips and tricks or some other places. Is there anybody else that has an idea just off the top of their head about what you'd like to hear about next year?
Oh, I would love to hear a little more workshop, detail on KDP, how to do Amazon KDP, or your own formatting and design. And I too am interested in screenwriting as something to try, something new.
And Gary, if you're going to do KDP, I think you should compare it to Ingram Spark.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that would mean I'd have to learn something about both of them. So yes, okay, I got it.
I'm pretty sure there are people out there that know something about both of them.
Okay.
You might even want to do a panel.
Yeah, exactly. That's just what I was going to say. A panel, get two people. Here's my experiences with Ingram Spark, and somebody else says this is what I did with KDP. Compare and contrast, and have the two people together. That's a great interface, and that's not work that you'd have to do. It's up to the presenters to do the work, Gary.
Well,
But can you tell me what you're talking about?
KDP versus
and Ingram Spark. You mean what those mean?
Yes.
Kindle Direct Publishing. It's publishing. It's basically putting your book out solely through
okay.
yeah. And KDP works, correct me if I'm wrong, KDP works directly with Amazon. It's Amazon's product, if you will. And Ingram Spark pushes your published work to all the houses, Target, Walmart, Amazon, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Stores and libraries. Hey, Marie, I didn't understand your question about, are there critique groups forming some social media site? What did you mean?
You're on.
Well, I'm kind of a novice at this. Where would I look for a critique group? My local library or Facebook or MWSA?
Yes, to all of the above. You can look in your local library. You can look in for other writing organizations around your area. Like I live in Virginia, we have Hampton Roads writers, we have Chesapeake Bay writers. And then within those, you can usually pick up smaller writing groups. And hopefully within...
I'm in a good one. I'm in a couple of good ones in Arizona, but there seems to be more of a tendency to encourage each other and try to market each other's work rather than pull it apart, pick it apart, make it
That's
better.
You can look at PEN, PEN. They're a national writing group, and they have local organizations, and they are known for their critique groups.
Oh, good.
If you guys don't have your own, I don't. Do you have do you set up critique groups for MWSA?
Not yet. We're talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have a lot of things around that, Greg. For example, there's beta reader programs. There's other programs that we have. We offer, some of them more successful than others, but we don't have anything specific and also genre specific critique groups. But I think we're large enough and diverse enough that we given the energy, we could do that.
For any of your writers who are writing for children, from picture books through young adult, SCBWI also has a site where you can sign up for a critique group. So.
Okay, and I don't want to cut anybody off. Anybody have any other questions, comments?
Well, Gary, just what we've been talking about might be a good, just a one day project of what are all these other organizations we're talking about, and where do they specialize in? Kind of like a resource thing.
Oh, so you just assemble where would we find a critique group?
Not just critique groups, but like if maybe Gary or Greg could come in and talk for 10 minutes about the children, all those letters you just said. SCBWI group.
And differentiate, maybe give us sort of their orientation, so people like me that finally retired could figure out which ones to join.
Right. And like somebody else, I'm a member of Sisters in Crime. So we could talk a little bit about Sisters in Crime and what they do. And, maybe you could pick a few different ones.
And you think just a webinar or a session solely to show what those resources would be?
Yeah, just one. I don't think it's
right.
a series of things that you would do.
But try and cover as many genres or specific or specialties as we can.
Yeah,
right.
Different organizations. And when you send out that survey that John was talking about, just add that to the survey and say, anybody are they a member of a group that they want to do a 10-minute explanation on?
Okay. All right. I got it.
Because we're going to find people like, I'm not a poetry person, but I'm sure there's poetry groups out there.
And I think that's when most of the people online, Greg, are book reviewers. I would venture guess, John will correct me, I venture guess everyone online except for me is a book reviewer. And they do it by genre, and there's a wealth of talent throughout MWSA from that book review and award program. So there's I'm sure a lot of them, the ones that write anyway, are in writers groups. Okay. Well, Greg, I got to tell you, thank you for what's the phrase, saving my bacon and coming in and helping get these organized. As soon as John taught me how to, click on the Zoom link, my job was done, and you've made it very enjoyable. So thank you so much, Greg, for all your help. I'm sure we'll organize a great plan for next year. But thank you, John. Thank you, John, Valerie, and everyone else. I really appreciate all your help. Greg, so this is all we've got, I think, unless anybody else got a last question.
Thanks, Greg.
I will leave you back to critique groups. I'll leave you all with one, the golden rule for critique group writers. Give notes the way you'd like to get them. Good to see you all. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Greg.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, can I talk with you for a few seconds?
Yeah, but I'd turn off the recording.
Yeah, good idea. I wanted to thank you for sending me the book which I got yesterday, and those coins. And so
The recording is still on, by the way.
it's okay.
Okay.
We can't hear you, Gary. I thought you were running the program. I guess not.
I'll edit it out. Trust me.
Okay. No, I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure to finally get that book. I can't believe all the, the hoopla to figure out, did my stuff get accepted? If so, which one was it? Was it the revised version? I haven't even looked. I'm afraid to find out the answer. But I've got a book. I've been published, and I'm gonna submit it somewhere. But I just wanted to go over those coins because I wasn't there, I guess, when you explained them at the conference. So I'm to be able to just give them to anybody. It's like a military challenge coin.
We haven't really invented a process, and I'm thankful that we haven't. And I've had input from, for example, some members on the board thought it'd be nice to just be able to sell them on our website. And other people said we should use them as some thank you. Truth in Lending with Valerie and John in the room and fellow board members. I mailed one to Greg to thank him for helping us. Right? He's not a member. I don't know that he, has a reason he would actually pay his $50 and be a member, but I felt that him helping us was significant.
Yeah.
When your email back to me highlights.
Yeah. So with the cabal members on board, my thoughts were, since you know who I'm talking about, that I should give one to the president of Southwest Writers, because of the efforts that Southwest Writers and military writers did a couple of years ago, and we had a joint conference to, reinforce, hey, you did good. We didn't have these three in 2019, but we got them now. So here you go, and thank you very much. So give one to her and people like that who have done things to help veterans in their writing, even if it hasn't necessarily been for Military Writers Society of America, but to help veterans write. So I thought also the government employee who runs the VA writing program in Albuquerque would be a good one.
Yeah, and he actually did a lot for us there too. So.
Yeah. So okay, well, that's what it was. Thank you very much for sending the book and sending the coins, and I will take a picture or I'll have somebody take a picture of me giving the coin to each person and send it to you, and then you can decide if you want to do anything with it.
I err on the side, just like a challenge coin from the commander, right? I don't believe they weren't that much to buy, but they can be used as something significant as a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't worked for a while, but that's what we were doing in the last unit that I was at, was that if you did something good, the general or the admiral would give you a coin.
Well, I know for MWSA, if you don't have your coin with you when you show up at the conference, you will have to buy a round of drinks at the bar.
No, wait a minute. I remember that from the Navy. You didn't do that in the Air Force, did you, John?
No comment. There's so many damn rules that you could buy the bar for. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, the first time I ran into that was 1967 when I reported into my first squadron, and they gave me a little plastic tiger. And they said, if you don't carry the tiger with you, you have to buy the rest of whoever's in the bar got to buy, And I can't. I have no idea where my tiger is, of course. But I was laughing because people were still posting on Facebook recently, I've still got my tiger. Have you got yours? No. All right. It was a very good program. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And let's see, you're in charge of doing the program for this year, right? The education.
Well, yeah. I guess at some point 6 months into the year, I took over for Jack London.
Right.
Right. And
you still got that. You haven't been able to get rid of that tar baby. It's still on your hands no matter what you do, huh?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I seem to have stepped in a bunch of gum in the jobs that I took on for MWSA. But these webinars, once John explained the mechanics of doing these, have been really enjoyable for me. I mean, Greg's engaging. I like his style of presenting. They're not They don't take a lot of time, believe it or not. Now that, we get the word out through social media, they're relatively easy to do if you get a good engaged speaker, right?
Right. So what I wanted to do is to tell you something I had told Jim Greenwald, but since the cabal is present right here, I have a presentation that I've given a few times already. It's not for MWSA members because it's called How to Write for and About the Military. And and what I offered it to Jim was, when you go to this, when we go to San Diego, and I expect I will actually be able to do that. If he wanted to offer a class to people who were not part of MWSA and as a public service, I'd be happy to present it. And I just tell you the same thing. If you decide that you would like to open these to outside the membership for people who are thinking about writing about the military, I think it's a good presentation. I think, Val, you've seen the slides, haven't you?
Yeah. I have a copy. I've actually shared it with people.
Yeah, it just file it away in the back of your head. I'd be happy to, it's already done. I just changed the date.
One easy thing is just send them to me in an email, and I'll put them on our website. I mean, this is a perfect thing to share as a member, even if it's really designed for people outside the military.
Well,
but
when I gave it this last week, I pitched it to the locals in Albuquerque, and I said, even if you're in the military, even if you were a Marine, you're not going to know a heck of a lot about the other services. And so I try to come up with examples and things that people who, I mean, I know how to write about Navy pilots, but I had to get a technical advisor to help me with the SEALs, because you don't know. So how do you get those kind of people? What kind of people do you need? And do you pay attention? Let's think about Jack London as an example. Do you pay attention to the first Navy guy that you see and say, okay, now that the Navy guy has looked at it, I don't have to ever worry about, I don't have to look at that again. I don't need another technical advisor. And then when I write him and say, that's not what we call, you don't call petty officer a petty officer unless you're putting him on report, or, you don't go like, you call sergeant when you see him. Hey, Sarge, come over here. Well, you don't go, hey, petty officer, come over here. Val, did you ever hear anybody do that?
No.
No, of course not. But those are the kind of things that I talk about, the little tweaks, how to get that right. The little tweaks about how do you say second lieutenant in 4 different languages, because they're or abbreviated actually, and they're not all the same. Every service has got a different way to do second lieutenant. But anyway, file it away. If you can use it. If you can't, it's all right.
Well, I can tell you that my relative new observation of MWSA is they're extremely diverse in their interests and everything else. And although we get a lot of military books, we get a lot of children's books, we get normal memoirs, things from spouses, and you feel the genres get filled up.
Yep, they do. I have submitted in more than 2 or 3 categories. I've submitted in lots of categories, and you'll get a new one from me for the Holes in Our Hearts, an anthology written by 55 New Mexicans about anything they wanted to write. So it lacks a theme, but that was deliberate because I was trying to reach people who had never written and never been published, or if they had written, they hadn't published. And I gave them free leeway. I said, you write something and I'll put it in the book. And if I had to re-edit it and put it into English, I did. And if we had a blind guy, we made sure we got it he got published. And the 2 people who don't even own computers, they did it all longhand. We got them in there, and I'm proud of that. I'm more proud of that book than I am of anything else I've ever done. That's even, a really better thing that I did. But I'm just so proud that I was able to help those people. And the state of New Mexico bought copies for every library in the entire country and the entire state. Right. That really made me feel great. So
congrats. And so you can be first in line again. I'll give you the Cabal first look. We're starting the season on the 2nd of January. So
absolutely. I'm ready. I've got electronic versions. I've got paper copies. I know how to fill the form out, and I've been a Cabal first test case before.
Are you going to submit that to NFPW or
absolutely? It's already gone. It's gone to NFPW. Good. And I know I'm going to take a hit because I've got some stuff in there that, if quality was the issue, I would have put them out, but I so much wanted people to get published that had never had a voice, and I knew they had stories to tell. And so Joe Badal and I talked about that. And it was like, put them in, and don't worry about it if you don't get any awards. It doesn't matter. What matters is you've helped some people take that first step. And he's right. He was absolutely right. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Hey Jim, if you mail me a coin, I'll tell you which reviewers you should pick. I didn't say that.
I at least know one. I'll let you two guys duke it out over who do I mean. Hey, good seeing you both again. And I don't know what the hell the problem was trying to get in, but I got in, but it took a lot. Well, so John, you answered me, right?
Well, the email you sent was for the reviewer Zoom, so maybe that was the reason.
Well, I just copied it off the Facebook page because the Facebook page had the advertisement, and I couldn't copy. I mean, I could if I would have fat fingered it in, but so I put up there, hey, I can't copy this. Would you send me the link? And that was what I.
It's fortunate I happened to have the reviewer's email open when you said that. Otherwise, it might have been turned out differently.
Oh.
I'm glad we got you hooked up tonight.
Yeah, well, that's what I found when you came back and said, well, you don't have to. I said, just send me the damn link. I can't make it work, And it worked.
Jim, they're almost always the same, by the way.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost always.
All right. Well, now, how many New Mexican members does MWSA have besides me and Joe Badal? Does anybody know the answer to that? Should I put an ad?
I do not know, sir, but I will find out.
Well, here's the question. Those little. I want to put a little note out in dispatches that says, "Hey, we're going to have a free class for veterans who are New Mexicans to write memoir for the first time." And but if there's nobody that's going to receive it, then there's no point in putting it in. But if you think that it would be worth it to put it in, I'll send it in to whoever's in charge of dispatch. That's you, Gary, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's on a submission form now on the website.
Yeah, I have a short, a medium, and a long version of the advertisement saying that veterans who would like to take a free class on how to learn to write memoir, basically it says click here, and then you go to the Southwest Writers page and it describes what you have to do, and then you click on the application page and you send it in, and I get it. We can do 35 veterans.
Send it to me just to my email, and I'll put it as a news item, and it also goes out to Facebook and everything. So
yeah, I was gonna recommend that too, because that way it'll get dispatches. We're not really sure when the next dispatches is going to be coming out, and so I think that would be a better way. And that way, I would say I'll get back to you and let you know how many New Mexico members we have anyhow. But the point is, it's not just reaching MWSA members. It's somebody who's an MWSA member who may know somebody in New Mexico who.
Well, you're right. You're right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Well, I just started sending this stuff out yesterday, so I'm working my way down to, and that was one of the things I wanted to talk about today was, should I put it into MWSA? And the answer is yes. There's no reason not to. And that's exactly the point, Val. I will beam it to you shortly, John, because it's already written.
Okay. And another thing for you, Val, just to remember that do the search on NM and then do it on New Mexico, because we didn't enforce rules on the state in the wild apricot.
Okay. All right, thanks. I appreciate that, because I did something before and I was like, how come we only have 2 members in California? I know we have more than 2 members, and that's why.
And it's even worse because in some cases it might be CALIF period is another state.
Oh,
so
God.
We may have a state.
Yeah.
All right. Good seeing everybody.
Bye. Good to see you.
Yasmin was listening, by the way. She was here. You can up your numbers of people who attended by 1.
Okay.
All right.
Sign in. She was laying on the bed listening.
Hi, Jasmine.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Jasmine.
Bye.
And thank you, Gary.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for everything. Thanks for the
No
morning.
worries. It was fun.
All right.
Thank you. All right, Valerie. I'm trying to figure out how. Okay.